Let me take you somewhere most people never think about. Not Israel, not Jerusalem, not the land of the patriarchs or the wilderness or the promised land. I want to take you east, far east, to the capital of the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen. Susa, the royal city of Persia. The year is somewhere around 480 BC. The Persian Empire under King Ahasuerus, known in history as Xerxes, stretches from India to Ethiopia. 127 provinces, millions of people, the most powerful military force on earth, gold and marble and lapis lazuli and wealth beyond comprehension, all concentrated in a palace complex so enormous that it took years to build and made every visitor feel like a grain of sand on an ocean floor. This is where our story begins. Not with the heroine. Not yet. First, we need to understand the world she was about to step into. King Ahasuerus was celebrating. He had been celebrating for a very long time, 180 days to be exact, displaying the riches and glory of his kingdom to all his nobles and officials. And when that 6-month display was over, he threw another feast. 7 days for all the people in the citadel of Susa, from the greatest to the least. Wine flowed according to each person's desire. The king had commanded that there be no restrictions. The garden of the palace was decorated with white and blue linen curtains, silver rings, marble pillars, couches of gold and silver on mosaic pavement, royal wine in golden cups, each cup different from the others. This is the world Esther would one day navigate. This is the man whose favor meant life, and whose displeasure meant death. On the 7th day of this feast, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he sent his 7 eunuchs to bring Queen Vashti before him. She was beautiful, the Bible tells us, and he wanted to display her to the people and officials, to present her, quite literally, as another one of his treasures. Vashti refused. This single act of refusal, a queen declining to be paraded before a room full of drunk men, sent a ripple through the entire empire. The king was furious. His advisors panicked. If this becomes known, they said, all women will despise their husbands. They counseled Ahasuerus to remove Vashti from her position permanently and find a replacement. A decree went out to every province, in every language. Let the king search for a new queen. Vashti disappears from the story here. We don't know what happened to her. The Bible doesn't tell us. But her empty throne is the opening that changes everything for a young Jewish woman living in the shadows of the most powerful city in the world. Her Hebrew name was Hadassah. It means myrtle, a small fragrant plant that grows quietly, without fanfare, often in places where more dramatic flowers refuse to bloom. But in Susa, she went by another name, Esther, a Persian name, possibly connected to the word for star. She was an orphan. Both her parents had died, and her older cousin Mordecai had taken her in and raised her as his own daughter. Mordecai was a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin, a descendant of those carried into exile from Jerusalem generations before. He worked at the king's gate, a position of some significance in the Persian court, where much of the city's business and justice was conducted. When the royal search began and beautiful young women were gathered from across the empire and brought to the citadel of Susa, Esther was among them. They were placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch in charge of the women, and given beauty treatments and special food and 12 months of preparation before they would each have their single night before the king. 12 months. A year of preparation for one night that would determine the rest of their lives. The Bible tells us something important about Esther in this environment. She won the favor of everyone who saw her. Haggai was so impressed that he immediately gave her the best place in the harem, 7 chosen maids to attend her, and the best portion of food. Something about her, her character, her bearing, her quiet intelligence made people want to help her. But here is the most important detail: the instruction that Mordecai had given her before she entered the palace. Do not reveal your people or your family background. She was Jewish. In the most powerful Gentile empire in the world, with the decree already in place ordering a search for the most beautiful women regardless of nationality, her cousin told her, "Keep this secret. Don't tell anyone who you really are." Esther obeyed. Every day, Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. He watched from the outside while she navigated the inside. And when Esther's turn came, after 12 months of preparation, taking nothing with her except what Haggai advised, she went before the king. Ahasuerus loved Esther more than all the other women. She won his grace and favor more than all the others. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen. The king held a great banquet in Esther's honor, gave a holiday to all the provinces, and distributed gifts with royal generosity. And still no one knew. Still the secret held. A Jewish orphan from a family of exiles, now sitting on the throne of Persia. Mordecai continued to sit at the king's gate. One day, while sitting there, he overheard 2 of the king's officers plotting to assassinate Ahasuerus. He told Esther. Esther told the king, giving credit to Mordecai. The officers were investigated, found guilty, and hanged on the gallows. The event was recorded in the royal chronicles. Mordecai's loyalty was documented. But at that moment, nothing was done to reward him. That detail will matter later. In stories like this, nothing is forgotten. Every seed eventually grows. After these events, King Ahasuerus honored a man named Haman. He elevated him above all the nobles, gave him a seat of honor higher than any other official. And the king commanded everyone at the royal gate to bow down and pay honor to Haman. Everyone did, everyone except Mordecai. Day after day, the royal officials at the king's gate would bow as Haman passed. Day after day, Mordecai remained standing. They asked him why he refused. He told them he was a Jew. The officials reported this to Haman. And when Haman saw for himself that Mordecai did not bow down or pay him honor, the Bible says something significant. It says Haman was filled with rage. But it also says that having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. He wanted to destroy all the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, every single one throughout all 127 provinces. One man refused to bow. And because of that one man's refusal, an entire people was condemned. Haman went to the king. He didn't name the Jewish people directly at first. He said, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them." He offered to pay 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury to cover the cost of destroying them. 10,000 talents, an astronomical sum. Then Haman was offering to fund genocide himself. The king took his signet ring and gave it to Haman. "Keep the money," he said. "Do with the people as you please." A decree was written in the king's name, sealed with the royal seal, sent to every province in every language. On the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be killed and their goods plundered. The Bible gives us a detail so chilling in its casualness that it stops the heart. After the decree went out, the Bible says, the king and Haman sat down to drink. While the city of Susa was bewildered and confused by the news, the two men who had just signed the death warrant for an entire people sat down with their wine. When Mordecai learned what had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. He went as far as the king's gate, which no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter. Throughout every province, wherever the king's decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Esther's attendants and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai. She was greatly distressed. She sent clothes for him to wear instead of the sackcloth, but he would not accept them. She sent one of the king's eunuchs to find out what was troubling him and why. Mordecai told him everything. He gave him a copy of the written decree. This wasn't rumor or fear. This was the official document with the royal seal, and told him to show it to Esther, to urge her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead for her people. The eunuch delivered the message, and Esther sent back an answer. All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death. The only exception is for the king to extend the gold scepter to them and spare their life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. This requires understanding. In the Persian court, even the queen could not approach the king unsummoned. To walk into the inner court uninvited was a capital offense, punishable by death regardless of rank or position. The only salvation was if the king chose to extend his golden scepter, a gesture of mercy that was entirely at his discretion. And it had been 30 days since Ahasuerus had called for Esther. She was telling Mordecai the truth. This could kill her. Mordecai's response was the most important thing anyone said in the entire book. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Read that again carefully. He wasn't flattering her. He wasn't giving her false comfort. He was doing something much harder. He was stripping away every reason she had to stay silent. You are not safe just because you live in the palace. Your secret will eventually be discovered, and the people will survive with or without you. God will find another way. But you will have chosen comfort over courage, and that choice has its own consequences. And then the question that has echoed through centuries. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Not a command, not a certainty, a question. Who knows? Maybe your whole life, the death of your parents, the adoption by your cousin, the 12 months of preparation, the night the king chose you above all others. Maybe none of it was accident. Maybe you have been placed exactly here, exactly now, for exactly this. The question doesn't require Esther to be certain. It only requires her to consider the possibility. Esther considered it. Her reply came back to Mordecai, and it was the reply of someone who had made a decision. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as well. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. 5 words, the most courageous 5 words in the book. If I perish, I perish. Not, I'm sure it will be fine. Not, God will protect me. just a clear-eyed acknowledgement of the risk and a decision to act anyway. On the third day of the fast, Esther put on her royal robes. This detail matters. She didn't go in sackcloth and ashes. She didn't go disheveled with grief. She dressed in her full queenly splendor. The robes, the jewelry, everything that marked her as royalty. She prepared herself with complete deliberateness, and then she walked into the inner court of the palace and stood facing the king's hall. King Ahasuerus was sitting on his royal throne, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, the Bible tells us he was pleased with her, and he held out to her the golden scepter. She was not going to die today. Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. The king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you." And here is where Esther does something that reveals a quality far more remarkable than bravery. She doesn't answer the question. She doesn't say what she came to say. Not yet. Instead, she invites the king to dinner. "If it pleases the king, let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." The king came. Haman came. They ate and drank, and the king asked again, "Now what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." And again, Esther didn't answer directly. She asked them to come to another banquet the next day. She said she would answer then. Why? Why delay when every hour of delay was an hour the decree still stood? The Bible doesn't tell us. But the effect was this. Haman left the first banquet in high spirits, elated at being the only official invited to dine with the queen. But on his way out, he passed Mordecai at the king's gate, and Mordecai did not rise or show any sign of fear. Haman was filled with rage, but he restrained himself and went home. He called together his friends and his wife Zeresh, and boasted about his wealth and many sons, and the honor the king had shown him. And that's not all," he said. "I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate." His wife and friends had a suggestion. Build a gallows 75 feet high and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go to the banquet happy. Haman thought this was an excellent idea. He had the gallows built. That night, the king could not sleep. This is one of those moments in the Bible where you feel the hand of something larger moving through ordinary circumstances. The king of the most powerful empire in the world, lying awake for reasons the Bible doesn't explain. He ordered the book of the Chronicles, the official royal records, to be brought in and read to him. In all the entries of all the days of his reign, the section they read contained one particular record, the account of how Mordecai had reported the assassination plot against Ahasuerus, the plot that had been discovered, the officers who had been hanged. "What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this?" the king asked. "Nothing has been done for him," his servants replied. The king asked, "Who is in the court?" Haman had just arrived in the outer court to ask the king about hanging Mordecai. The timing, which the Bible presents as entirely natural, entirely ordinary, is breathtaking. "Haman is standing in the court," the servants said. "Bring him in," the king said. When Haman entered, and the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Haman, who believed he was the man the king most wanted to honor, thought to himself and said, "For the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" The king said, "Go at once. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." The look on Haman's face in that moment is not described by the Bible. It doesn't need to be. Haman took the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai, the man he had come to ask to hang, and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate. Haman rushed home, with his head covered in grief, and told his wife and friends everything that had happened. His wise men and his wife said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. The king and Haman came to eat with Queen Esther, and again the king asked her, over their wine, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." This was the moment, the one she had prepared for, the one she had fasted 3 days for, the one she had said, "If I perish for." Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." The king's face changed. Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, "An adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in fury, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. Haman, knowing his fate was sealed, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. He threw himself on the couch where Esther was reclining. Just then, the king returned from the palace garden. He saw Haman falling on the couch where Esther was. He said, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the words left the king's mouth, his servants covered Haman's face, the signal of a condemned man. One of the king's eunuchs spoke up. "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Hang him on it." They hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. That same day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman. Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told the king how Mordecai was related to her, and the king took off his signet ring, the one he had given to Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. But the problem was not yet solved. The first decree, the one ordering the destruction of all Jews on the 13th day of the 12th month, was still in force. A decree issued in the king's name and sealed with his ring could not simply be revoked. This was Persian law. Not even the king could undo his own sealed decree. Esther approached the king again. She fell at his feet and wept, and begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman. She said, "How can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" The king extended the golden scepter to her again. He told her to write another decree in the king's name to counter the first one, sealed with the royal seal. What was written in the king's name and sealed with his ring could not be revoked. But a second decree could give the Jews the right to protect themselves and fight back. A new decree went out, written by Mordecai, in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed with the royal signet ring, sent by mounted couriers riding royal horses to every province. The decree granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality that might attack them, and to plunder the property of their enemies. When this decree reached every province, when the Jews saw that they now had the right to defend themselves, there was joy and gladness among them, a feast and a day of celebration. And in every province and city, many people of other nationalities became Jews, because fear of the Jews had seized them. The day that had been intended for their destruction became a day of deliverance. The Jews fought on the 13th of Adar and rested on the 14th, making it a day of feasting and joy. Mordecai recorded these events and established the festival of Purim, named after the pur, the lot that Haman had cast to determine the date of destruction. The very mechanism of the enemy's plan became the name of the celebration. What was meant to determine the day of death became the name of a party. Every year since, Jewish communities around the world have gathered to read the book of Esther, to remember what happened in the court of Ahasuerus in those days. The story is read aloud in its entirety, and whenever Haman's name is mentioned, the crowd makes noise, rattles, stamps, shouts, to drown out the name of the one who tried to erase them. There's something I want you to notice about this entire story. God is never mentioned in the book of Esther, not once. His name does not appear in the text. There is no vision, no angel, no burning bush, no voice from heaven, no miracle in the spectacular sense, no parted sea, no fire from the sky, no dramatic supernatural intervention. And yet, the king cannot sleep on exactly the right night. The record that is read happens to be exactly the record that contains Mordecai's name. Haman arrives at the palace at exactly the moment the king is asking what should be done for Mordecai. The gallows Haman built for Mordecai becomes the instrument of Haman's own death. An orphan girl who was taken into exile becomes the queen of the empire at exactly the moment her people need a voice inside the palace. No miracles, just timing. Just circumstances arranged so precisely that coincidence stops being an adequate explanation. This is, I think, the deepest thing this book has to say. That God's presence does not always announce itself. That providence does not always come with fire and thunder and visible signs. Sometimes it looks like a king who can't sleep, like a book being opened to a particular page, like a girl from the wrong family in the right place. The question Mordecai asked Esther is the question this book asks every person who reads it. Who knows but that you have come to your position for such a time as this? Not your royal position. Your position. Whatever seat you occupy in whatever room you find yourself in, whatever access you have, whatever relationships, whatever knowledge, whatever resources, could it be that none of it is accident? Could it be that the losses and the unexpected turns and the doors that closed and the doors that opened have all been arranging you for something? Esther did not know she was going to be called to save her people when she was taken to the palace. She was an orphan trying to survive in a foreign empire. She kept her head down, and she obeyed her cousin. She went through the 12 months of preparation. She won the favor of everyone who saw her without apparently trying to. She was not prepared to be a hero. She was just faithfully present in the place she found herself. And when the moment came, she had a choice. Stay silent, and perhaps survive. Speak, and perhaps die. She chose to speak. She prepared carefully. 3 days of fasting, patient strategy, exactly the right moment to ask exactly the right question. And she walked into the king's court in her royal robes with 5 of the most important words she would ever speak already decided. If I perish, I perish. That's not the absence of fear. That is the decision that something matters more than the fear. The book of Esther is the story of an orphan who became a queen and then chose to use that position for something larger than her own comfort. It is the story of a people who were supposed to be erased, but instead established a celebration that still continues 3,000 years later. And it is a quiet, persistent argument that the universe is not random, that lives are not accidents, that the seemingly small details, who adopts you, what empire you are born into, which night a king cannot sleep, may be the architecture of something much larger than you can see from where you're standing. Esther couldn't see the whole picture. She saw a closed door and a death sentence and 30 days of silence from the king. She saw impossible odds and a law that could kill her before she said a single word. She walked in anyway. The scepter extended. It always extends toward those who walk in anyway.